Hello everyone, this is going to be the second installment of my FACEIT summary series. This time we're going to be looking at North America instead of EMEA, and we're going to be doing very much the same thing. Trying to catch you up on all the action that happened in week one of the round robin. So if you don't know too much about the FACEIT system, basically what we're looking at here, we're going to be focusing on the top 16 teams in the Masters division. And the reason we're focusing on those teams is one, it's the highest level of competition, but two, the stakes are the highest. Out of these 16 teams, the top 8 of those are going to go to a knockout bracket of some sorts, for details to be confirmed. But once those top 8 get to that part of the tournament, the top 3 from that top 8 will get a spot of Esports World Cup. So the stakes are very real, and as such, it means we're actually going to be getting all of the good teams competing, because everyone's really keen to go to the Esports World Cup and have a shot at all that prize money. So we can take a look at the schedule here, because it's a video, so there's going to be a spreadsheet. And this is the schedule we're looking at. So as you can see, there's lots of games. Lots of games where it's quite hard to keep track of everything. Week 1 has already happened. All these games have already happened. Actually, with the exception of this game, which has actually been delayed because of the collegiate land, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But there's a lot of games. So I'm going to try and keep you up to date on all of these games. We'll flick through all of the matches, all the match results. I've got all the tabs open, so we can fly through these results, and we can start to pick apart some of the more important results. And as we get towards the crunch end of the season, or the crunch end of this round robin, I should say, once we get to week 7, obviously there'll be some very high stakes games in terms of qualification and seeding and all of this. So, without much further ado, let's crack on. Let's get involved. So, as you can see, the FACEIT maybe bugs a little bit here. It's actually only best of 3. They didn't actually play every single map in the game here. It's just listed all the maps, but they're listed as team, and this is obviously the TSM roster now was Timeless, and this was also Magic Maple's debut for them. And they played against Smart Fellas, which is, some people recognize some of these members, Dust and Azra from, who is Goldfish from OWCS top 8. But you'd still expect TSM to very much dominate this game, and dominate this game they did, a nice clean 2-0, and the sort of start they would want. Then we get to see FMCL, who maybe didn't have quite the result they would have hoped for in OWCS, but again, against another top 8 OWCS team in Unk Inc. But they came out on top on this one. And yeah, relatively straightforward again, not too much to speak about here. And a lot of these games we'll see, because it is a top 16 teams, there'll be some quite one-sided games. And then there'll also be a handful of games each week that are actually going to end up being quite pivotal for the seeding. Then we see Dreamland actually beat Pip here. So this is actually very much an upset. I think people had Pip. Obviously, they had a chance to qualify for Dallas based on the circuit points they'd achieved in Stage 2. That didn't work out for them. And unfortunately, a really bad start here as well. So Dreamland really sort of making a case for themselves to get into that top 8 with this early result. I think you got to be disappointed with this if you're Pip. It looks like straight out in 2 maps. Don't know the details of this one, but obviously not a great start at all. Zolik coming in to replace Maple, obviously, in the starting lineup. But it's really not worked out. I think that's fair to say. It's not worked out. And Pip are going to have to do some work. They have some things to fix on a particularly bad run of form here. Then we're going to get Toronto Defiant, who played against Green Fortnite. And I think no one will be surprised to hear that Toronto won. They won. Good for them. So no surprises there. I think most people expect Toronto just to cruise this, and then put themselves in a very good position to get one of those FACEIT, or one of those Esports World Cup spots at the end of it. So no surprises. Then we get Citrus Nation against Valentine. So Citrus Nation really became the team that was starting to take names. They knocked out, obviously, well, at the time, Timeless, now TSM, and they knocked out Luminosity. So really, in this Orisa meta, put themselves on the map quite a lot. Obviously, Orisa's going to be, or has been nerfed, so we'll have to see if their power level is, how attached their power level was to the strength of that hero, but at least initially they're going to play Valentine, one of the weaker teams in the tournament, and they're going to get a straightforward 2-0 as well. So, yeah, not too much to worry about there. Similarly, we're going to get Gilbert's Nightmare, who people might know actually because it's the Jake, SK, and Muma team. They played Luminosity, and, well, as much as I think lots of people are excited to see the SK, Jake, and Muma team play, Luminosity winning as you would expect. And yeah, not too much to say about that one. Now, this one, a little bit more interesting, maybe also interesting because of the nature of the scoreline here, is this was M80 against Students of the Game. Students of the Game obviously did get one of the Dallas spots, finishes top 3, and it was also Tree playing in this one. I think we can maybe see exactly how much Tree played. Looks like he played map 1 on support, actually. Played map 1 on support, and then Cow and Rack both came back into the support line for map 2. So the tree support didn't work out. I don't know what the plan was there. I guess the idea was they were going to do... I don't know, it was just tree instead of cow, so maybe it was an availability issue. We don't know exactly, but I think the storyline here is... And if you've watched Uncoachable, where we spoke to Gator, I think he very much talked about how actually there's Toronto and there's M80. There's actually a pretty big gap now forming between some of these other teams, and Students of the Game being one of those teams. And based off this result, that gap does still seem to be significant. A very dominant win for M80 here. Then Shikigami beat Unk Inc. as well, so I think this is a very good result for Shikigami, who probably had a disappointing stage 2 in OWCS. They had to come from an absolute dogfight in Hollywood, but back to winning ways, and maybe Shikigami, I think, one of these teams now look at this tournament and think, ooh, top 8 is doable. We could squeak into one of those 7th or 8th qualification spots, and to get those qualification spots, what you need to do is beat the teams that would also be in with a shot of fighting for those qualification spots, and that's exactly what they've done here. A very good win early on from Shikigami. And then we get to the next Toronto game, and they won. Toronto won. No, nothing to write home about. Toronto still on top. FMCL also over Smartfella, so again, pretty much a one-sided game as you'd expect. FMCL doing the business. Not too much to worry about there. Now we get into this really interesting situation where Green Fortnite, who, I mean, the roster has people I recognise, X10, Halo. The rest of the roster, I'm afraid to say, I'm not very familiar with. But Dreamland obviously got that big result earlier and then fall to Green Fortnite. So a real sort of chaos of teams taking matches and maps off each other here. And this one doesn't even seem particularly close either. So I don't know if Green Fortnite are going to become some sort of dark horse team. Obviously, their other game was against Toronto, which isn't a very good barometer of how good they actually are. But a good result here, and maybe a team to keep an eye on as we go forward to see if Green Fortnite can beat any of these other teams around them in that kind of area. Then we get Avidity versus T or TSM. Again, the scores haven't generated properly for whatever reason, but it was a 2-0 and quite straightforward for TSM. And after their initial blunder from OWCS Stage 2, feels like everything's back on track and they've won a couple of straightforward games here. So maybe back to winning ways. Now, then we get Pip, who redeemed themselves a little bit here by actually claiming the win, but it's fair to say this looks like a dogfight, right? 4-3 on Eichenwald, and then the Shambali quite close as well. So Pip do manage to win, but this isn't really the sort of result I look at and go, Pip are back. This is a game you'd probably expect him to win 2-0. And while there's always a bit more variety in a best of 3 because less maps, all of this, I think this doesn't really answer any of the questions or concerns I had about Pip at this point. And maybe getting into that top 8 is still a little bit ropey for Pip, and they're going to have to try and put a better string of results together. Then Students of the Game beat Gilbert's Nightmare. Again, one-sided, everything sort of went as planned. Maybe interesting here again for Students of the Game is how much did Tree play, if at all? Did they use Colluge at all? And it feels like, at least initially here, no, just the standard Students of the Game roster, the same lineup that qualified them for Dallas, played all of these ones here. So fair to say that maybe that initial one when we saw Tree on support was a pure availability issue rather than any kind of tactical swap. And then we get one of the more peculiar results where Shikigami obviously got that good initial win, but nobody expected them to beat M80, but they actually took a map off M80. They won the first map, then M80 had to clutch it out. Now I think, if I remember right, we can look through the scoreboard here, because I think this is one where actually they had availability issues here, M80, because you can see Gator's listed as a player here. So if I go through it, map 1, Gator was on DPS. This was the map they lost, so Gator DPS, not up to scratch. Nero was also in on support alongside Pelican. So it was a Gator and Happy DPS line, a Pelican Nero back line. So that didn't work out for them on map 1. When we go to round 2, it was a Gator Nero back line. I think if I remember, Gator told me correctly, I can't remember which map it was, but he Ajax one of his maps. So the Gator Lucio came out, but the Gator Lucio was actually the solution for him against Shikigami. So the Gator Lucio turned it all around, and they won round 2. They won round 3, again with that Gator Nero backline. So they managed to get past the availability issues here at M80 and stick to winning ways. But the scoreline probably closer than it would have been, say, if M80 had their full roster, to be fair. So we can take a look here. One thing that's maybe, before we look at the scoreboard, one thing that's worth mentioning is actually we're one game short right now because Luminosity and Citrus Nation has been rescheduled actually for this week, so it's going to be Thursday the 9th. And that was, I don't know exactly why, but my assumption is very much both of these teams are over collegiate lands, and there's other competitions going on, so they've managed to get it rescheduled to next week to help them out, which I guess seems reasonable, and obviously actually one of the more exciting games on the horizon as well. So looking forward to that one. When we get to the actual standings of the group, I think there's not too much to take away from it right now, and there's sort of these 4 teams at the top. Obviously, you expect Citrus Nation and Luminosity, one of them will join these in the 2-0 club after their game. Students of the Game, the one, and Pip, probably the ones missing here with 1-1. Obviously, Students of the Game had to play M80, so you'd expect them to shoot up the rankings once the sort of fixture, the power level of the fixtures they had to play balances out. But not too much to look into right now, early on in the table. If we take a look at the schedule, we can focus on week 2, which will be happening, depending on when you're watching this, could be happening right now. But there's a lot of interesting games here. I think Toronto actually have a great doubleheader. They play Luminosity and Students of the Game, so 2 games you'd expect them to win, but how close can you get to Toronto is probably a good barometer of, wow, how good are you right now? Likewise, we're going to see Citrus Nation play Students of the Game, and we're going to play FMCL, or we're going to see FMCL play TSM. So lots of really interesting ones here. Maybe even potentially in this Luminosity Dreamland one, since Dreamland had that good result, could be an interesting one to throw out there. And if I'm Pirates in Pajamas, if I'm a fan of them, maybe Unk Inc. and Smart Fellas are games we would expect to win, especially the Smart Fellas one, but should be a straightforward week for Pip to get back on track. So that's all the action. That's everything that's coming up. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what's happened in that first week. Obviously, we don't have a lot of replays or live streams of some of these games, so some of the details are missing, unfortunately. As we go through, we're going to be streaming more of them on this channel. We're going to be watching more of the replays on this channel and live on Twitch as well. So there'll be a lot more action and hopefully a little bit more information and detail I can bring you in future weeks. But hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you now know a little bit more about FACEIT League and how week 1 went. I'll be trying to do these weekly to keep everyone in the loop. So stay tuned to the channel. Let me know what you thought. Comments, suggestions, format changes, anything like this. It's very much a new concept, so happy to tweak it and figure stuff out as we go along. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you for some more FACEIT action.